Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is RB Wood, and this is the launch party for Ruadán Books' fifth offering this year called Spring in the City. I'm going to ask everybody to mute, please, because I am getting some feedback. We have released our second of the In the Series anthologies, the third of which is now open for submissions called Summer in the City. The first one was Winter in the City. I'll bet you all can guess what the fourth one will be. But tonight we're celebrating Spring in the City. And we have a good selection of the authors who participated. And what I thought I would do first is just read the cities and the authors' names who have written about those cities. And talk a little bit about what's behind it. And then I wanted to have each of the authors introduce themselves, talk about their story a little bit, the inspiration for their story, and then we're going to go around and ask some questions. You're going to see that this is pretty much free form. It's the first time we've all gotten together and actually seen each other, or at least a good percentage of the authors and the editors in the same place. So it's kind of exciting to be here. And we are happy that you've joined us for this celebration because, as you may or may not know, it always takes a little while for a book from start to finish, from conception to production, to come into the world. And the birth of this child is something both myself and my co-host, who's joined us tonight, Anna Koon, really love bringing to you all. So let me just go through the table of contents first, real quick, and then we'll open it up for folks on the call to talk about their stories. So the foreword for Spring in the City was written by Mercedes M. Yardley, Stoker Award winner, called The Book of Dreams. And Mercedes writes a lot of whimsical horror. If you don't know what that means, pick up any one of her books. I recommend them all. I can do that because we're also going to be printing two of them in 2026 and 2027. But she was good enough to write the introduction to this, and it's followed by a story about Stockholm by Zan van Ruyen, and they are phenomenal writer, and they have a book called Born of Malice coming out with us in 2026. Tim Lees wrote the story called Manchester. Next up, Tel Aviv by Jonathan Papernick. Montreal by Sue J. Sokol and D.F. McCourt. London Town by Troy Sayat. Los Angeles by Amanda Celia Lang. Oslo, Ross Baxter. Detroit by V.L. Barycz. Did I get that right, Victoria?
It's Barch, but that was pretty close.
Yeah, it's like Irish. There are 19 consonants, of which only one is pronounced. Thank you very much for that,
Yep.
Bart. Chester by D. Booth, Cape Town by Rich Larson, New York City by Jeff Enos, St. Louis by John Joseph Ryan, Brisbane by E.J. Delaney, Vancouver by Maria Haskins. I'm going to get crap for that tomorrow. Taipei by Avram Lavinsky, and Chicago by J.R. Blanes. And if you're interested and you get through all of that, you can read about the two editors, myself, RB Wood, and Anna Koon. Let me first turn it over to my co-host, Anna, to talk a little bit about who and what she does at Ruadán, and then we'll start picking random names just to put everybody in the spotlight for a few seconds. What do you think about that, Anna?
Yes, I love being put on the spot. This is awesome. Thank you. Especially during the holiday season when I'm already starting, the fuel is starting to start that motors, yeah, things are starting to go on empty. Like see, there you go. Sorry, I'm running on fumes at this point of the year. So my name is Anna Koon, and I'm the acquisitions editor of Ruadán. And our process with these anthologies is just like anytime we have an open call, we are digging through the slush pile and keeping in mind that, especially with these anthologies, we want only one story for each city represented. And of course, you can imagine certain cities are more popular than others. So it means that for some of you that picked maybe a more popular destination, that's not a criticism at all. It means that you actually beat out perhaps other people who had written about that city as well. So congratulations. And as we pick the best of the best and narrow it down, and then we kind of pick how we want our readers to jump all over the map as they're reading the anthology. We then get to fight over who gets to work with what author. And I like that I get to see some familiar faces, having not seen you in a good amount of months, Amanda, and Jonathan and Jeff, and like I'm seeing people I haven't seen in a handful of months. So hello, hello. But in general, I am sort of the gatekeeper, if you will, when we do any sort of an open call and start to go through everything. And when I feel like there's that special little X factor in something that I'm reading, I usually let Rich and Maria and the rest of the team know that we all need to read this and chime in on what we're thinking. So congratulations. I'm very excited about this anthology. I think it came together very, very well. And I hope you're all as excited as I am in its launch. Is there
Thank you,
anything
Anna.
else I need to say?
I don't know, but because it's the end of the season. Anna's a visual artist as well, and she had a boatload of shows over the course of the last month and a half, as well as a big Christmas special for her selling her visual art, and so she's working on Final Brain Cells. So I'm going to call on her randomly because she can't hit me
I'm
because
wearing
she's on
a
the other end
fox
of the
sweater.
string.
I should get points for that. I'm wearing a fox sweater. I
Okay,
actually
it
put
doesn't
that
mean I'm
on
gonna
for
pick. It doesn't mean I'm gonna pick on you less, by the way. Just saying. So I don't know. I've been friends for a long time. She and my wife are friends, and me and her husband are quite close as well. So you guys don't want to really hear from the editors because the fighting part in the back end, nobody really wants to know how the sausage is made, but the sausage was made and it's very, very tasty. And the people who added the spice and the flavor are on this Zoom call, and those are the people that you're gonna want to speak to. So I'm gonna kick it over to Amanda first, who wrote our story Los Angeles. Amanda, welcome. It's always good to see you. And let's talk a little bit about your story, the inspiration for your story, and what you're doing these days as a writer. And then we'll move on through the rest of the windows.
Yeah. So I'm a huge movie nerd, and so it was kind of natural that I would pick Los Angeles since that's the home of Hollywood and all these movies. I wanted to tell a story that told the history of Hollywood. So my story actually spans from the silent film era all the way up to like our CGI superhero films, and it's told from the point of view of an immortal witch who basically has small town dreams, or she's a small town witch with big Hollywood dreams, I should say. And she ends up going to Hollywood and basically taking over Los Angeles with the might of her magic and her charisma, to the point where she ends up destroying the entire city at the beginning of the story.
Yeah, that hook immediately had us. Welcome, Amanda, and thank you for being a part of this collection. Appreciate it. Um, I embarrassed him before, but let's embarrass my former professor, Mr. Jonathan Papernick, who is a brilliant writer. I can say that now because I'm not trying to get an A in his class anymore. Um, John, how are you, sir? And let's talk a little bit about Tel Aviv and the inspiration for that. Speaking of superheroes.
Yeah, thanks for that introduction. Yeah, the Tel Aviv story. Well, I did have a story published in your Winter in the City anthology set in Jerusalem. So I knew I wanted to write another one for you because it was such a lovely anthology. So I was casting around for an idea, and I've been reading articles about people trying to boycott a movie that Gal Gadot was in because she played Wonder Woman and she was Israeli, and they were trying to boycott her. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I need to create my own superhero here. I'd also read there's another one. Sabra was also being changed her character in the Marvel movie to make her not Sabra anymore. So I thought it was time to create a real Israeli superhero at a time when they need one.
John, thank you for that. I mean, what are you working on these days, and what are you doing for let's put a plug in for Emerson.
What am I doing for Emerson? I'm on sabbatical, so that's the best part.
Okay, somebody kick John because now I'm jealous. Thank
Well,
you for that.
I've been racking my brain trying to come up with an idea for your summer anthology. It's not easy to come up with these ideas. Y'all know that, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the other things we'll talk about is sentient cities, but I want to get through and talk with all the authors as well. Next up on my list is Maria Haskins. Now before we hired Maria to do our nonfiction editing and as our third editor on board at Ruadán. She submitted a story about Vancouver to us, which we accepted. So she has two hats. Tonight's hat is as writer Maria. So Maria, let's talk about Vancouver.
Yeah, that was this was sort of a story. So my story is Vancouver. I'm originally I grew up born and grew up in Sweden, but moved to British Columbia a very long time ago. So we live right outside Vancouver, and I kind of knew I wanted to do a Vancouver story, and it's set in one of my favorite places in Vancouver, which is Third Beach, which is in Stanley Park, which is like the huge woodsy, beautiful park in Vancouver. And I would say Third Beach is the best beach in Vancouver. And it's kind of like a parenthood horror story, I would say. It's a mother who takes her two kids to this beach, which is also the beach where she drowned a few years earlier, and kind of goes through what the haunting that she still feels when she goes back there, and the things that are in the water, and the things that are inside her. And yeah, it was just I love that spot. And I really wanted to set a story there. And it also has this other thread running through it a little bit, which is that Vancouver is a city that's built on top of a multitude of creeks and streams. The whole city was essentially constructed just paving over all these streams and like this water that flows through the whole city underneath the ground, and kind of trying to draw some parallels there with the stuff that we pave over and hide beneath the surface, and that's still there, whether we acknowledge it or not. So yeah, it had a lot of, I was really excited because this was a story that's been rolling around in my head for a long time. Something with Third Beach, something with bringing your kids there, and something in the water. So it was I'm so glad I managed to pull that story together for this and that it was accepted for the anthology. It's a really great team to be part of.
Well, thank you for that. And just so you all know, someone is writing for Locust now. I won't tell you who it is, but she wrote a story called Vancouver. So congratulations again, Maria, for
Thanks.
that.
Yeah, that's the brand new thing. Yeah.
So we have a gentleman who's currently in the UK, and I think it's what is it, 1:20 in the morning right now, Ross?
It is indeed. So good morning, everybody, or good evening to some folks. Yeah, it is, but it's absolutely, it's great to be here. it's a fantastic opportunity to meet you. So thanks very much for the invite. Yeah, so I've written about. I'm based in England, although I am married to a Norwegian, and I have been for 30 odd years. I've got two Anglo-Viking children, and we have a house in England, in the UK, and we also have a house in Norway. So um, I thought I'd write about Oslo, which is the
Yes.
capital of Norway, and it's very much a city of contrasts. You've got the very, very cold, very, very dark winters, and you've got pretty warm and very, very bright summers. Obviously, spring is somewhere in between. And Norway and Oslo is really, I think, a nation of contrasts. So I think, John, it's a bit like Israel, or the states in many respects. That, I mean, I remember that, in the 70s, Norway was probably one of the poorest countries in Europe, and now it's probably the richest country in the world in terms of GDP. So that's been a massive change from poor to rich in a matter of, well, certainly in the span of a lifetime, 30 to 40 years. Um, and when you have that big change, it's quite stressful. It's stressful on a city, it's stressful on a nation, stressful on a people. And in rapid change, things get left behind quite easily. And sort of a bit like Stockholm, a bit like Sweden. Norway's a very, how can you say, ancient nation, and when things get left behind, there's a lot of things which can get left behind and sort of lurk around in the shadows, which is what I wrote about. Something um, uh, in Norwegian you call Norken, which is more of a fairy, or not in the Disney sense of the word, maybe a sprite, or a dark sprite. And it's easy to hide in a city, especially if you're a supernatural being, and that's what I wrote about. So I enjoy writing about Norway, and this was a bit of um, a different thing for me, because I'm normally sort of horror, sci-fi, fantasy, and write quite a lot of erotica as well. Although I'm not a very erotic person, and this was quite a nice opportunity to sort of write something else. And I was very pleased you guys accepted it, and I do appreciate that. So it's like, I suppose everybody on this call, if you don't like write, if you don't love writing, you wouldn't be here. And it's it was a really nice thing to do. I really enjoyed writing it, and it's nice when you enjoy a story. It really is, and I enjoyed this one. And just listening to you guys earlier on about the cities covered, it's I can't wait to read the whole book. It sounds great. I think there's a real lot of there's a wealth of stories there, and I can't wait.
That's an excellent point, Ross, because quite frankly, I remember when we were going through the editing back and forth, partway through, it was like, well, wait a minute, we should pick a different local folklore creature. And we just kind of gelled with that conversation. But I think everybody can agree each city has a distinct personality, right? And I love the thought of sentient cities, so much life in an area packed together that a city actually does come alive. And I think with the first two anthologies, we've actually nailed that. With every story that we've gotten is sentient cities, and that leads me straight from Oslo back to the States to a story about the city of Detroit, Victoria. So if you want to talk to us a little bit, unmute yourself and let's hear about your city and the inspiration for Detroit.
Yeah, so I am from Detroit. I grew up in Detroit. I live in Detroit right now. It is, in my opinion, the best city in the world. And I really wanted to focus on the generational trauma of Detroit and of the city and of its people, because I think that those things go hand in hand. And our city motto is actually like pretty folklory, because it's we hope for better things and we'll rise from the ashes. So it's very phoenixy, but it's also fire is such a huge theme for Detroit, because of our riots, um, and the automotive industry. And there's all this, like, there's so sorry, I get like so overwhelmed talking about Detroit, because I want people to just like to love it as much as I do. And I feel like people are finally starting to see the greatness of Detroit, because we are rebuilding and we are like coming back stronger and gritty, and the Lions are doing great. Well, they're not doing great this season, but um so this story follows three kids. It takes place on a block, and it really is this focus of in what we inherit from our parents, and the fact that like what our parents sacrificed for us, that that's cyclical, and unless we break that cycle, um that kind of trauma will always exist, and we
Mhm.
have to break that cycle in order for Detroit to get better and to heal. So yeah.
All the stories have speculative elements to it because that's obviously part of the call here. But I think you did a great job of writing, really some hope punk, as it were, to give some hope about the future, not just about Detroit, but in general. And I think that spoke to all of us, Victoria. So we loved the story that you put together. Thank you for that. Let's go a little north of the states again. Duff, let's talk about Montreal.
Yeah, of course. So I live in Montreal, but it's a chosen city for me. I grew up in rural Ontario and I've been here 12 years now. My kids have grown up here. And actually, what happened was just before the call for Spring in the City went out originally, I had signed on with a couple of other local writers to edit an anthology of stories, science fiction stories entirely set in Montreal. So me and the talented Sujay Sokol and Alain Ducharme and Paul Jarvie and Gloria Botbill, the four of us, were starting to put together this anthology and reading all of these stories set in Montreal. And then the Spring in the City call came out, and Sue, one of my co-editors, and I were like, "Oh, this." We'd been thinking about all of the stories that we've read in Montreal and all of the great stories there still are to tell in the city. And then your call came out, and Sue and I were both like, we should write something for this individually, because we had never written together. And then we got to chatting about it a week later and found that we had both sort of independently come up with the same idea, which is that Montreal is such a beautiful city in the winter. Winter in Montreal I mean, it's cold. It can be quite hard at times, but it is undeniably beautiful.
I can
And in the
attest.
summer, it's
I
very
spent
beautiful
last
as
I
well.
spent last Christmas there. It's a beautiful city. So yeah,
Yeah.
I just want to put an asterisk. You're right. It's lovely, and I may go back this year.
Yeah. It's so picturesque in the summer. It's so picturesque in the winter. But in the spring in Montreal, what happens is, because the city sits underneath this cloak of snow all winter long, right? There's often no thaw from like December until March. And then, late March comes and the snow starts to melt. And both Sue and I were sort of turning over in our heads at the same time this thought that had independently had about how when the snow melts in Montreal, you often see the ugliest parts of the city coming out from underneath it first. Especially, all of our own sort of sins of civilization, all of the
Mhm.
like cigarette butts and garbage and dog shit is like the first thing that you see when Montreal starts to melt in the summer. And we both felt that there was some sort of like supernatural horror story there of like the city's retribution upon us of the ills that we wreak upon this island. And so I'm really thankful for this anthology, because it gave me a great chance to work together with Sue. And like I said, we never collaborated before on any piece of fiction, and I am so thrilled with the way it turned out, and we're both so thrilled that Ruadán bought it.
Oh, we loved it, Duff. We really did, And when we worked with you and Sue, You know, it couldn't have been a nicer collaboration. But I think what also underpins, you know, the Wakening of Montreal, I think you captured real well. But I also think you have some underpinnings about what's really important in society today as well. You know, cautionary tales, as it were, with what we're experiencing today. We all know that stories is how we discover who we are as a people, and I mean that in general, and as individuals, right? As writers, it's an exploration of who we are. You know, my father, who was a staunch conservative, had a picture of him and Ronald Reagan up on his thing. I'm not at all a staunch Republican here in the States. And he said, well, that's all right. You'll discover as you get older, you'll become more and more conservative, like I did. Okay. All right. That's fine. Yeah. And then I went and got an MFA. And then I started reading a lot more of the authors that I'd never read before. And I got annoyed because the stories that I'd missed growing up that I was finally catching up with that I could have read were fantastic. Think about Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower, right? Fantastic story. Fantastic allegory to what happened in the 80s and what is happening today with religious zealotism. Is that a word? I just made it up. Don't look at me, John. I'm not looking at you right now. Um, but what's happening today, and I think you captured that, Duff, and I think everybody here captured sprinkling of what's been going on in the world, and there are parts of the world, along with the sentient setting, along with the other layers that Maria had said earlier. And let's continue on because we still have a couple of authors I want to talk to. Sorry, JR, you're going to be last because I want to land on Chicago. So you relax for a few minutes. Anna, you still good? Yeah? I just wanted to call you out because you said don't call on me. All right. See, I'm so dead. She lives about 2 minutes from me, so she's going to kill me tomorrow. Exactly. So I see. Oh gosh, who do I want to call on next? So many people to call. I want to speak to all of them. Jeff, let's go to you next, and then to John. Let's talk about your story a little bit, Jeff, because there's a story about your city I want to tell at the end.
Hi, so yeah, I'm Jeff. I did the New York City story. I grew up in Southern California actually, but I've lived in New York now for like the last 11 years. So, you know, I saw the call and I said, you know, well, if anyone could do it, I think I could. You know, I think I have a little bit of a handle on, you know, the city and everything. So yeah, the story is basically about I'm a guy who's kind of like dealing with some unprocessed grief from some people that he's lost in his life. Um, the springtime kind of comes around and it brings like these like beautiful like invasive like purple flowers that kind of grow over the whole city.
Mm-hmm.
They also kind of bring like different effects on people. So it affects him in this way where you know it forces him to kind of deal with the grief and kind of deal with I guess the story is a lot about like finding your place in the city too, because there's a lot of things on his mind in terms of, you know, what he wants to do, you know, in terms of career, and where he wants to live in the city. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
about like him coming to terms with that essentially. Yeah, the a lot of the inspiration too came with, I mean, I kind of saw the picture that you guys used for the open call. I think it was literally purple flowers, and I was like, well, what can I do with that? And then just kind of went from there. So,
Fantastic. While I live in Boston, I've been here for a couple of decades. I grew up in New York. I grew up 30 miles east of the city on Long Island, and I see Jack is raising a hand. Oh, Jack joined us. Hey, Jack, how are you? You can
Good, how you
unmute.
doing?
What's your question?
So I just wanted to know, in a story like that, how did you see the location as informing the story? Could that story have been somewhere else, or did you feel like it was a New York story?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I guess it's hard to answer that because I'm so like within the city, because I've lived here for a while now. But when I was talking to Anna, she kind of did like bring something to my attention in terms of like New York, because like New York is kind of a city that's gone through a lot of trauma in the past, and the flowers and everything that kind of happens to the city is kind of like another one of those aspects of like a kind of a group like trauma, like that everyone in the city has kind of experienced. So I guess afterwards afterwards I kind of did, but writing it, no, I really just kind of like I said, I went off of the picture, and then just it kind of just like came out from there.
I think how you handled grief as well, Jeff, was
Yeah,
so well done in the story.
thank you.
When you get to a certain age, you do start to lose people, and sometimes it happens earlier.
Mhm.
And I just remember the impact. There wasn't a single story in this collection, and there's not a single writer on this Zoom call right now whose story didn't stick with me for long after I finished it. And then, by the way, that includes Jack, who I just called and put a spotlight on, who I've read before, and he and I have a love affair with Frankenstein, but that's a whole conversation for another day. Already see him laughing. But Jeff, again, I loved your story. I loved how you dealt with grief. It really stuck with me, and all the stories have stuck with me. And let's talk. Speaking of stories that stick with you, John, let's go with you next, and your story for Spring in the City, Mr. JJ Ryan.
Hey everybody, it's a pleasure to be with you all, and thank you all for taking time as well. So yeah, I'm also from Southern California originally. I lived in Los Angeles as a kid, and one of my earliest memories is seeing. We lived in Culver City, where all the studios used to be, and one of my earliest memories is seeing MGM Studios burn. Um, one of the big studios there, not the whole thing, but my dad and I walked up on this, overlook, and I could see it burning. And so I think maybe the small town witch, was there for a little visit in the 70s. Um, but I've lived in St. Louis for decades, and it's very much my home. And I hear a lot of people talking about the grit of their cities, like Detroit and when the snow melts in Montreal, and St. Louis is very much in that vein. It seems like the only time we make national news is for bad things, but there are actually a lot of good things here. But be that as it may, I principally write crime fiction, but I love speculative fiction in all its forms, and I've written horror and science fiction as well. So my story takes place kind of near Forest Park. I don't know if anybody's been to St. Louis, but yeah, Forest Park is amazing. It's actually bigger than Central Park. We like to boast that. And we have free museums in our town, world-class museums. So an art museum, history museum, and so forth. So the 1904 World's Fair was held in Forest Park. So I thought, it's good to put it there, but not make obvious notes about that landmark. So I had an idea, because I write crime fiction, for a guy walking his dog in the park, and it's a beautiful spring day, red buds, dogwoods, storm's coming, but it's lovely out. And he sees an old man in his car, and he seems to be in some distress. And I guess it's a tiny spoiler, but I'll go ahead and give it away. But it takes him a while to realize the old man is trying to actually kill himself. So on this beautiful day, here's this guy, obviously in the worst moment of his life, trying to end his life. And so he decides to take him in, get ahead of the storm, and come to his apartment and try to console him. And so there's a story within a story. I probably should have led with that, but yeah, I love stories where the storyteller is talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
not like you, the reader. I'm not that kind of second person, but where the storyteller is talking to someone in the story itself, and they're just there as kind of a listener. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I can only think of classic examples like Heart of Darkness, or I think to some extent The Great Gatsby, because
Yep.
Nick Carraway is such a non-entity, really. I mean, he's kind of a filter for everything that happens. So
Yeah.
I'm just really
He's the lens.
yeah, he's a lens for it, and so I kind of play with that and try to hopefully have a decent twist to go with it. So yeah.
Yeah, you did. That's why you're part of this group, John. So thank you for that. Tim, let's have a chat with you. There we
Right.
go.
I think I'm unmuted, yes?
You
Can you
are
hear?
unmuted, sir. Yep.
Excellent. Firstly, it's wonderful to be here and to see everybody like this. I'm Tim Lees. I'm from Manchester, England, but I am now living in Chicago, where I've been for the last 15 years, and it's currently very, very cold. But my story, I tried a few things, and eventually it was kind of like write what you know, and I fell back on nostalgia and wrote about my old hometown. It's set in Manchester in the 80s. And at that time, it was very much, it probably still is, very much a lot of different subcultures that all interacted. My local pub, I lived in what was then a rather infamous area called Hume. My local pub, you'd go in and there'd be a table of political activists, a table of gay people, a table of musicians, a table of ex-students, a table of church people. They would all interact, but there were these definite subsets of people. And I thought, well, what if there was a subset of magicians as well, who were kind of keeping it quiet, but, you know. And I then thought, what about introducing the very unpleasant Mancunian serial killers, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley? And what would it be like to have one of these people in your head talking to you? And that's where we went. It could have been a lot nastier. I was careful to try and keep it, sort of PG level, not X,
Right.
So that was the story.
Well, you captured the clicks well. The characters were well done. You felt, and you could almost taste the air in Manchester. I remember what the air was like in the 80s in Manchester.
Oh yeah.
and I have to say, and I'm speaking for Anna here, and myself a little bit, but certainly more for Anna. If there are two people who love stories about serial killers on here, and I think many of us do, it is Anna and myself. That's why we always say speculative fiction or noir crime stories, because that's the sort of thing at Ruadán we like. And I think you spanned all of that, Tim, with your story. I felt like I was back in the 80s. So your how you wove the story was perfect. I could feel, and I don't mean this as an insult in any way. I hope you don't take it that way. But you remember back in high school or just before the leaving certs, right? That there were always those cliques of people in high school, right? There were the theater people, and then there were the musicians, and there were the jocks, and there were the nerds, and then whatever label you want. It's you did that really well, and you kind of wove that into the story. But I thought that was fantastic. And I see notes coming in from John right now, Mr. Crime Fiction. So yeah, something to keep in mind, John, for future reference. But I think I really loved the kind of nostalgia 80s aspect of it, but I love the again layers, right? That's what these stories if these stories had one thing in common, and they are and it's the only thing. It's the layers that's there. And every time you read them, you got something different out of the stories. So I think that was well done.
I think one thing I did want to do with the serial killer aspect is get away from the idea of Hannibal Lecter, the genius. Most serial killers are not. They're rather pathetic individuals who have
Mhm.
high flown ideas of their own abilities.
Mhm.
Brady, I think, was very much like that. Felt he was a Nietzschean Superman. And yet, if you look at what he did, he killed children, the most vulnerable people in society. And that's one of the things I wanted to get across.
And you did that really, really well. I mean, the narcissism of some of these guys and the holier than thou aspect of it is I think you captured it real well. I think back to Dexter, and the two favorite seasons of Dexter for me were the ice road uh, trucker killer, which is season one, and season four with John Lithgow. But it was all genius serial killers facing off with one another, right?
Yeah.
And that trope has really been played out to some degree. I like Stephen Graham Jones, for example, who wrote a serial killer who took advantage of people very much the way you wrote Brady, but he would show up after a storm dressed as a fireman. So he was there as somebody who supposedly would help you. And that was how that started. Anyway, we could talk about this all night. Let's see who's next on my list. Avram, we haven't spoken to you as of yet. Let's talk about your story, Avram.
Sure. So I had the distinct privilege when I was 29 of living in Taipei for a while. And so when I saw the call, I thought the dragon boat races would be an incredible sort of spring spectacle to include in a story. And I really started from there. I I had to choose characters who were kind of outsiders because I was an outsider there. I wanted very much to learn the language and to absorb the culture. I was very fortunate to get a job where I didn't have to speak English. So I was a piano tuner there. My boss gave me a motorcycle and a map that I couldn't read. And I got hopelessly lost every day, all day long. And without fail, my last tuning of the day, I would always, always, always be invited in for dinner because that's the way the people of Taiwan are, which took me a little while to get used to as a New Yorker. But the characters in my story are at the American school there, and they're faced with a suicide of someone that they're very close to. It's a female character, male character, and some of the pressures and the guilt and the line between love and hate that happens around those situations. It was something that a coworker of mine had experienced, and I thought it was a good way to work into some issues in the story, and I'm very, very happy that Anna and Arby chose it for inclusion.
Well, I felt like an outsider, but sometimes that's the best way to explore a city. I mean, how many people grew up in a city and didn't actually go see the monuments and the museums and the sites that maybe a tourist would see? I mean, I grew up in New York, and I never went to the Statue of Liberty until I wasn't living in New York anymore. So I think you captured that, but I also think you captured the the essence of Taipei itself. So and again, another story, another take, another different viewpoint on the city, but coming together and really exploring the depth of what it meant to be living in a city as an outsider. One person left, Mr. Blanes. That would be you, sir. Let's talk a little bit about Chicago.
I'm from Chicago. Not originally, I'm originally from Indiana, but I've lived in Chicago for almost 30 years at this point. And I really wanted to talk about the segregation that is in Chicago. It's a really big problem here in Chicago. We're extremely segregated by people and by culture. And one of the issues that comes from that is the gentrification of neighborhoods at this point. There's a lot of times that neighborhoods that are essentially owned by certain groups of people are taken over by other groups of people, and we push those people out. Generally, those tend to be at the time poorer areas where people can't afford it, and it's the wealthy that sees something in it. A lot of times, it's because it runs along the L train, um, or is close to downtown, or the arts. The artists are moving there, so they are starting to attract different crowds. So I wanted to talk about that, and obviously, me being a white person, I didn't think that that would be the correct character to show that from, because we're usually more the ones who are doing the gentrifying. Even as the artists who move into the poor areas, we're still the ones who are the start of the gentrification. So it was very important to me to write it from a character who is the person who belongs in that neighborhood, who this is their neighborhood that their home's getting taken away from. So I chose to do a Black woman, which is very difficult. And I wrote that, and then I had 9 sensitivity readers read it, 3 people that I knew, and I actually paid 6 different people to read through it because I wanted to make sure that I was representing not only Black people but Black women in correctly. So that was very important to me when I was writing this story, that I wanted it to be from um, from the race that's dealing with these issues and dealing with these problems, and have it feel real to the people who would be the ones who are experiencing that. Was very important to me. And I set it in spring because Chicago has harsh winters, just like Detroit and Montreal. But Montreal may be pretty. We are not pretty in Chicago. It gets gross and dirty, and our snow is like black and muddy. And Chicagoans tend not to love the winter. So when spring comes, we go out in droves. Like 50 degrees hits, and we're out in t-shirts and shorts. So one of the things you see on social media, Chicagoans in t-shirt and short, 50-degree weather, and that's actually something that happens because we're so happy to be out of the cold. So I kind of want to have these different things going on with this like beautiful time where people are celebrating the warmth of the spring, contradicted by the darkness that's being imposed on these neighborhoods and towns. So it was just really important to me to kind of show that, because I think that's a very Chicago story. It's something that happens time and time and again, and unfortunately will probably keep happening, for as long as the city's around.
Yeah, I mean, the theme of colonization is one that needs to be talked about more, and that's what we like. Those are the subjects we like to address throughout the stories that we pick for our anthologies, but also for the novels. And I think you addressed a little bit of New Orleans in your book, Portraits of Decay, for us, JR. That's doing okay. And again, we're living in a time. Now, I grew up. I'm old. I'm 61 years old. It's not that old, but I guess it's the new 40. But I grew up in the 60s and 70s. And the 60s, to hear my parents talk about the 60s and the problems in the 60s feels like what we're going through collectively as societies today. I don't know if it was because Bowie died in 2016 and everything's gone to hell since, or what the story is. Yeah, everybody's nodding their heads. That was fantastic. But there is no more important time to write stories that tell of what's really going on, because we don't get it from the news. We don't. We don't get the full story. We get what's going to sell. And that's why storytelling, whether it's word of mouth and handed down by generations or sitting on a Kindle, is so important. Well, maybe not a Kindle, because we don't really own those books. They could take them out anytime we want, but that's a whole other conversation. But storytelling is so important, and that's why we love anthologies. Anthologies historically aren't money makers, and we all know this. But I think all of you hit so many different points and so many different things that people are feeling today, while making your cities feel like a character in your books, which was obviously something that was really important to us. And then talking about maybe some subjects and some topics that might make some people feel uncomfortable, and we should feel uncomfortable. They should be spoken about, and you guys all did a great job telling those stories. And I loved Winter in the City. Winter in the City was my brainchild from a decade ago, and there's a whole story behind that, which I'll share at some point. But I think Spring in the City, in many ways, is so much better because I think the writing is much more diverse. I think there's voices of people who have not been heard before that we were able to uplift with this anthology. And every one of your stories hit something personal to both you and something that was important for people to hear about while still being entertaining. And that's the way you get all the readers, right? You make the points and you talk about the things that are important to you. But if you make it entertaining, the people who agree with you and are friends of yours are going to buy your book no matter what. But what you want to do is you want to convince another 100 people, maybe another 100 after that, and maybe 1,000 after that. And that's what we like to do. We like to make people think. Anna, would you agree that these stories all had so many layers to them and were so thoughtful?
Yes. No, I will. I will agree with Rich that I felt like we were bringing more to the table than just, meaning you all, or bringing more to the table than just entertainment. And I liked that. I liked how each and every story makes someone, yes, it's entertaining, but it also makes someone think as well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
That's important to us. I'm glad it was important enough for you guys to not only write it down, but to take that leap and submit it to a new press. And we appreciate you and we appreciate your art. So thank you all for that. Today is a day of celebration for us. I'd like to open it up with the first topic. And again, if you want, you can raise your hands. Jack had done that earlier. A few people have raised their hands. If you want to, or just, raise your hand on the screen. I want to address sentient cities and how you guys went about making the cities, which oftentimes are a background for stories, they're a setting, but your settings came alive as characters. Every one of you did that. And I'd love to know if that was something that was in the forefront of your mind while writing the story, or if that was something that just came naturally as the story developed. JR, go ahead.
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I always like to have my settings be characters, which is probably why I mostly write real places and not use like imaginary places in my writing. But it was really important to bring Chicago to life in this story because of what I was talking about. So for me, it was, I live on mostly the north side, but I spent a lot of time on the south side while writing this and going to those areas and drinking and going to the museums because there's a lot, people always think of the south side of Chicago as this really bad, rough war place, and it's not. There's some very beautiful places on the south side. There's some amazing museums on the south side. There's a beautiful Latin American museum, one of the best is on that side of town, and people don't know about it. So I wanted to show that this isn't a war zone. This is a home for people. So for me, it was very important to show that and to get the smells and the sounds of the L train. We're so used to hearing that in Chicago. If you're by an L train, you hear it all over the place. And the music that's playing in the spring, people playing in the background and sitting on their stoops and neighbors just like walking over and passing beers to each other or just hanging out and their children playing. So I really wanted to capture that moment of what the city is in an area that's not considered by most people who don't live in this city um, a great place. I wanted to sort of kind of change people's mind about that by showing it's there's darkness that's coming from the outside. It's not just born in the inside of this place.
Yeah, I think you did a great job with that. And I mean, the economy of words that in a short story, it's poetry, really, if you think about it. What poetry is real economy of words, and to get all the layers in and tell your story without it feeling heavy or overburdened. It's a skill that you all have, whether you realize it or not. And I think you did a great job with it. Anybody else want to talk a little bit about sentient settings, sentient cities in particular? Victoria?
Yeah. I can actually kind of I feel like Chicago and Detroit we're like sister cities kind of, or brother cities, or but that was something that was really important to me too, was a lot of times people look at Detroit and unless they're in our downtown, they're like, oh, it's rough, or oh, it doesn't, like, it's busted windows and things like that. And it is really frustrating to me because, we take, even if we're not wealthy, we take pride in our community. And that was something that was really important to me, which is why I have it take place on a single block. And that block it's tired, it's worn down, but it is still clear that the people have pride in their community and they take care of their community and they take care of each other. Um, but I really wanted to play with like the duality of like, yes, we take care of each other, but there is still so much rage in Detroit from all of the things that have been done to the people of Detroit. And so I really wanted to play with that idea by having the Nyan Rouge, which is actually a Detroit folklore, that we have a little parade where we kick him out of the city every year. And we chase a man that's dressed all in red with horns every year. But I really wanted to play with that idea of like the idea of, we have that, like that past that is always going to be our past, but we have to somehow look at it and say, not put it away, but we have to look at it and say, okay, we've learned from it. And we can still be angry, but that doesn't mean that we can't move towards the future. So
Lovely. And again, that's why I think the In the City series appeals to people. It's the philosophy of it takes a village to raise a child is disappearing so quickly. And the last place and last vestiges where you can see that in practice, large scale, are the cities, especially the neighborhoods in the cities. I'm not talking about the financial districts or the corporate centers, but the real heart of the cities, the neighborhoods of the cities, where those festivals and those street parties and hanging out on the stoops and handing your neighbors a beer and making sure their children as well as your children are safe, right? Everybody's looking after everybody else. And I think you captured that real well. I think Chicago captured that. I think in many ways, all of you captured that aspect of your cities from different perspectives, whether it was Tel Aviv or Montreal or Los Angeles. I think you captured that as well. And uh, I think the hardest part, once we decided on the stories we wanted, was deciding on the order of the stories, because there's a flow to these things, and that again, I really don't want to show you how the sausage is made, because it's gnashing of teeth and crying and stamping of feet, and that's just me getting up in the morning. So, but I mean, that was the real conversation of where we wanted to do it. It's why we started with Stockholm and this story about folklore and identity, and ended with Chicago and a story about really colonization, right? The themes of the stories were all different, but we wanted to start and end with modern trials that our society is going through today. Identity is one, right? Colonization is still something, and it's even more so. Thank God it's come more to the forefront than it had in the past, right? Telling Native Americans that they should all drive Studebagers and drink whiskey. When we did that to the various tribes back in the 20s was a horrific thing to do. And we we have a long way to go, but we've come a distance from that. But we need to keep our eye on the ball, and that's just one of our many jobs as writers, right? So other aspects, sentient cities, other things you'd like to talk about with regard to the cities. Duff, I see your hands raised.
Yeah, I mean, so the story that Sue and I wrote about Montreal, we took the approach of the very common sort of duality of cities, especially cities as green as Montreal, where there's Montreal is an island city, and the island is very green, and there's a real palpable natural presence. You can tell the wooded mountain that this island is still there underneath everything that we've done to it, right? And so we were talking about the sort of city, the soul of the city as a natural space, and then the secondary sort of soul of the city that has been built up from all of the imposed order and structure and disorder that's been built unnaturally onto it. But what Sue and I want to avoid doing is the common approach here is to talk about these two elements being in conflict and the solution being, the natural city is seen as the inherently good one, and we need to find a way for the unnatural city to, live in peace and coexist with the natural city. But in Canada, the natural world, there's a long historical literary tradition of seeing the natural world of Canada as being a terrifying adversary in our writing. And we wanted to really embrace that and show that these two sides of the city, which both had a life of their own, were at war. And it was not our job as humans on this island to, try and make a peace, and certainly not to pick a winner, but in fact to simply not be ground to dust in between these two implacable and ineffable gods that are the island of Montreal and the city of Montreal.
I think Maria captured that as another story about a Canadian city with Vancouver, with all the waterways that have been covered over but still exist underneath, and
Right.
I liked those two stories, especially playing one off the other in the anthology. Anybody else? Any thoughts on that?
I also loved Maria's characterization of the city and I mean, I think many of you did it really, really well. But Maria, you almost made the ocean kind of your antagonist, and it was very poetically done. I'm sure you have something to share about that.
Yeah. So I think for my story, that thing with the ocean was really like if you're in Vancouver, sure, there's the city, but there's water everywhere. Like if you're in Vancouver, there's bridges everywhere. There's the inlets. I mean, it's just there's water. It is, and the water is the pretty part. Like if you look at Vancouver, sure, it's a beautiful city, maybe. I'm not sure I would agree, but like the surroundings are what makes it beautiful. The ocean, and I've always felt like that the city is almost sort of just clinging to the edges of this ocean inlet. And these mountains didn't really get into the mountains in my story, but the ocean, I feel like the ocean is what gives Vancouver everything. It gives it the life that it has, and
I felt like the ocean was the beating heart of the city.
Yeah, its own thing, and like that's like you construct this city that's, like I said, just clinging to the edge of the ocean and is trying to be like a big city and new and modern and everything. And meanwhile, the ocean's just there. It's just doing its thing. It's very deep, it's cold, it's the Pacific, like I love it. I mean, I just love that whole water. And like I said, that particularly when you're at that beach, there's something about the drama of it, like this big inlet, like you can see all the freighter traffic come in, you can see seals, you can see all sorts of seabirds, and it's just this blend of this urban, very urban landscape and this absolutely ancient ocean, ancient mountains. That's the
They
million
were
dollar view of Vancouver.
they were here before we were, and they'll be here after we're gone.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yes.
One thing I do want to speak to you all about. Now, we've talked about layers and we've talked about sentient settings and talking about some serious messages with entertainment. But putting all that in 3 to 5,000 words, maybe a little more than that, right, is poetry in itself. And I think it's understood, Ross. Take care, bud. I think it's very, very important to pick and choose the aspects of the story to tell without losing the message and without losing your readers. I'd love to hear how you guys approach a short story from that perspective, because it's so different than writing longer fiction, right? And a lot of you on this call have a experience with writing longer fiction. Do you find putting together a short story, a complex short story, easier, harder, just different? How do you guys go and approach that? Well, making everybody think. Up, Victoria.
I actually was going to say you were invaluable to me because this was my first short story. And this actually was my first publication like that I knew was going to happen before my debut, before I got the call about my debut. And so I remember submitting it to you and you being like, your dialogue is great and it's moving great, but you're doing a little bit too much, telling or too much showing and, like all of these little things outside of the dialogue that were like dragging the story down and that didn't really make a lot of sense. And you just were like, I thank you because
Well,
you got to the heart of it so quick for me. And like I was going over your notes after our meeting and I just was like, oh my gosh, he understood exactly what I was trying to say, even though I couldn't articulate it myself during our meeting. And so I'd go through the notes and then I literally just like it just came out. And it just was so cool to be able to submit it back to you and you to be like, oh my God, like you nailed it.
well, okay, you made me blush. Thank you very much for that. But if you really want to do that, embarrass John Papernick, who's one of the people who taught me how to do that properly. Oh, he's on this call. John, one of the things I am going to put you on the spot a little bit because we're also friends outside of here. One of the things with your story and your story that you wrote for Winter in the City, Jerusalem. Are you writing Haifa for?
I'm mulling over a couple ideas right now, and I just got a crazy one today, so we'll see if I can make it work.
Oh, that okay. Now I'm excited. You know, you did a fabulous job. We all know and have seen the news about the issues that have been going on in the Middle East and have been going on for years and have come to a head once again. And I think you thread a potentially volatile subject with beauty and grace and thoughtfulness while still making a really important point and or really important points that you wanted to make with your stories. And being a Jewish man yourself, and in his, were you born in Israel and then moved to Canada, or were you
No,
born in Canada?
no, my son lives in Israel, so.
Oh, your son lives there now. You know, I just you captured what it's like to be a country under siege, but you did it in a way that I think explored the people and the ancient vibe that is Israel and the cities there that are there. And Tel Aviv and Jerusalem are two very distinct personalities. And I think you caught that real well. To Victoria's point, thank you for saying those lovely things, but the bones of the story were there, Victoria. You just needed a little nudge in the right direction. And that's what John taught me, except I did it nicely. And John beat me because he knew I needed to be beaten because I'm older than he is. You know,
Older, not that much older.
yeah, but you write better, and you were right, and that's the part that really annoys me. But that's a whole other kettle of fish. I think putting that together in a short story. Now, you've written some great poetry, John. Writing a short story and getting the elements in it that you want is very much like poetry. It doesn't surprise me that your short stories are as poignant. I just think it's amazing that people who haven't written poetry before are able to turn that around because, you think of a novel, there's no real economy of words there, right? It's 100,000 words. You've got plenty of room to tell and spread out and tell your story. In fact, some people spread out way too much to tell their story. But you have to be concise, yet entertaining. You have to be poignant, yet not preachy, right? These are all aspects of the short story that you hit. And I'd love to hear how you guys think about that. Is that more a natural ability during the refinement process, or do you think about these things as you go into your stories? And John, I'm putting you on the spot initially first because I know what your answers are to these questions. But I think they're open for discussion with the whole group, and I'd just love to hear everybody's process.
I mean, mine is more for the editing. I tend to write longer when I even write a short story. I think originally Chicago was closer to 6,000 words, maybe even 7,000 words when I first wrote it. Um, and for me, I need to do that to get up. But there's a lot of backstory that goes into that. There's a lot of me writing things I need to know about characters or about situations that the characters are going to go through, and then I can kind of cut that stuff down. So I find that that's more in the rewriting process, which is the process I probably enjoy the most. And then, of course, working with an editor afterwards who's like cut this even more, and really getting to the point and the heart of the story. I think I think it was a brother of mine said it once. He said that, as a writer, you have to make the clay and then sculpt, and then the editing process is sculpting. And I really take that to heart. I think for me, it's like I got to kind of like make this big thing and then chop it down, at least for sure. Well, for novels, even too. I think everything's for me, it's like the more that's on the page, the more I have to work with. And then it's finding out what's the necessary parts to make that story work.
And how do you go through that decision, JR?
I think
okay. I know how you do it, but I'd like to just kind of throw it out there for everybody else to hear, because I know you work really close with Anna on your novel as well as the short story.
Yeah, I mean, before I get to Anna, I think it's trying to find what are the things that are unnecessary. So it's a lot of like the backstory that I need to get to know the characters. Like I don't write the character forms, which like what color are their eyes and what color are their hair and what are their hobbies. I don't do that. So I kind of do that in first writes, is I kind of just write to kind of figure out the characters. I probably have way more description than I need about the sceneries that I'm doing and the places I'm doing, but I need all that to find out what is important. And then it's just chopping away and figuring out, do I really need this, the readers to know about this, or was this something that as a writer I just needed to know to get into this character or to get into this scene or to get, so it's fine like chopping that. And then it's also the same thing with dialogue. Like, does this sound realistic? Is it, um, do I need to have them say this in so many words? Can I find a quicker way for them to say it? Can there be a quicker back and forth that's going? And then you give it to an editor who, luckily Anna is amazing at this, to find like, no, this doesn't need to be here, or you could shine this a little bit more, or you could even add to this a little bit more. I think that having those other eyes come on to it, and especially with Chicago having sensitivity readers who came and were like, no, this is not how he would act. This is not what we would say. These are not those kind of, this is not how we would interact with each other in these situations. So that's another way of kind of chipping away in the editing process, is having other eyes on your stories. Even before, like I said, it was, Anna is great because she polishes everything to it's nice and shiny. But even before that, finding other people to read your stories, especially if you're writing from a point of view that is not necessarily one that is yours, you have to have people out there who are making sure that you are representing their cultures and their traditions and everything correctly. To me, that's very important. I think something all writers should do. So that also is part of the editing process.
You're absolutely right. That's what should be done as a part of the writing and editing process, and it's all part of the learning aspect. I love the research aspect of writing. In fact, that's often my rabbit hole. Some people have TikTok as their rabbit hole. Research is mine, and as well as I do, because I wrote Bayou Whispers from the perspective of a mixed race woman, and there's whole set of psychological aspects that go along with that as well. And I got a letter from I got a letter that was really important from one of the people who I had do my sensitivity reading, and she said, "You captured this so well, I have no notes." Which meant I did my research right. That's our job, right? Especially if we're going to write speculative fiction, there's got to be something that can ground the reader so that they can hold on to before they get into the fantastical, right? Lord of the Rings, it was 50 pages of smoking weed and running around hobbit holes before the action really started. But that is our job, right? People say, "Oh, writing is a solitary and anybody could do it." Do it well takes a lot of work. I think you all put the work in, and you all did very well with this. I see we're about 7 minutes from the end of this. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to run through with regard to sentient cities, writing short stories, construction, your story, or we can just do a round robin? You can tell us what you're working on now, because I'd like to hear that for one. Yeah, I see some people nodding and smiling. So let's do that. Oh, John's back. So we're going to start with you, John. I'm going to throw you under the bus first, man. What are you working on now?
Me, John?
Yeah, you, John.
Okay, cool.
Sorry, there's Jonathan and John.
Yeah, all good. Hello, Jonathan. Admire the spelling of your name. I have a novel that I wrapped a while ago. It's set in the St. Louis area, and it's got 2 timelines. And actually, some of the issues that you've addressed tonight, and others about where we are in this moment in our nation, is very present for me and distressing to me, as I think it is to everyone on this call. And so I'm trying to go back in time to figure out, in part, how we got here and how we get out of it. So just little things. But St. Louis is instrumental in a lot of this nation's history. There's an excellent book by Walter Johnson called "The Broken Heart of America."
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, we were at the hub for all the good and the bad, and that's very much. I love history, so I'm trying to play around with that, and it's the big stuff, but also it's kind of an island murder mystery. So it takes place on a Mississippi River island, which do exist, if anybody doesn't know this. And some of them are quite substantial, and they're almost all uninhabited. So there's one at the confluence of the Missouri and Mississippi rivers, which is about 2 miles long and a half-mile wide and very thickly wooded. So I thought that'd be a good place for an industrial magnate after World War II to build his retreat and have things happen. So that's where I'm at.
That sounds like fun, man. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. Jeff? Yeah, I'm going in a completely different order now, and I'm making it up, guys. So
Yeah, so I've never done long fiction before, so I'm starting something beginnings of a novel about like a little boy and his bully who gets like stuck in the forest during like a late night sleepover and kind of trying to find their way out of it. It's, kind of like a coming of age type of story. Also has like a little bit of like haunted house vibes with like an adjacent like haunted house when they get out of the forest. So that's what I'm kind of working on right now.
excellent. Thank you for that. Duff, what are you working on?
Yeah, well, so actually the main thing I'd like to mention is that when you talked about the sort of hopeful sensibilities in some of the stories, including ours, my writing usually tends to be very nihilistic, but it's my co-author Sujay Sokal who writes very much in the hope punk space, and their first novel, Cycling to Asylum, was a very hopeful science fiction story about coming from New York to Canada, as Z did. And Z just published, a couple of months ago, was released by Flame Arrow Publishing up here in Canada, 5 Points on an Invisible Line, which is the sequel to that book, a good 10 years in the making. And it is fantastic. So rather than promote anything of mine, I would say check out Sue's novel, 5 Points on an Invisible Line. And then Sue and I are editing this collection, Unreal, of speculative fiction stories coming out, speculative fiction stories entirely set on the island of Montreal, will be coming out also from Flame Arrow Books in 2026.
Fantastic. Well done. And send my regards to Sue when you speak to her next. Will you please?
Yeah, I will be seeing Sue on Thursday.
Perfect. Amanda?
Yeah, so I actually have a few projects that are coming out soon. I just finished a novelette that'll be coming out at the end of December called After the Solstice, which is a sci-fi romance. So I'm excited about that. I'm currently working on my third short story collection, which is tentatively called For Those Who Stay Buried, which was a story that I had ended up selling to Deadlands. And so that's kind of like my main story for that one. But there are 13 stories that are going to be in that collection that all have to do with underdogs who fight back. And so everybody in my collection starts off in really bad situations, but all come out with just victorious. So hopefully that will get sold soon. And then I'm also working on several short stories for some open calls, including one for Summer in the City. I'm not sure what my story all the way is going to be yet, but I know what my entity is. And it's an entity that I have actually been working on in a novel that I'm hoping to finish soon. So this would be like a little spin-off, like maybe the kind of like mini origin story of where that entity came from. But again, it has to do with entertainment and spectacle and all of that. So yeah.
And what are you doing after lunch? Excellent. Thank you. We look forward to seeing that, and I look forward to hearing from you with the open call.
Yeah,
Avram?
I'm not sure if the city sorry. I'm
No,
not sure
that's okay.
that I'm writing about is going to qualify, so I'll have to email you privately and see if it works. But if it doesn't, I'm still going to run with it because I'm so excited to revisit this entity. So
You should always write from your heart, you know? Excellent. Fun stuff. Avram? Up.
There we go. Kind of an exciting time for me. I just got signed with an agent over the summer, so my hopefully debut novel is on submission, and that is kind of a heist story, but it's hopefully the first of a series, and it's based on a gentleman who actually just passed away in the last few weeks, named Alvin Cass. Jeff Enos may be aware of him. So he was the chief chaplain for the New York City Police Department for almost 6 decades, and some of his stories are actually like kind of novel worthy. So that's where I'm going with that. I have I think 5 or 6 stories that are already placed that should come out at some point in the coming year. I also have a novelette in Alfred Hitchcock's Mystery Magazine. If you subscribe to the magazine or if you have access to it, please read it. It's called The Bank Guys Before Armageddon, and I worked very, very hard on it. I hope people like it. And I'm also working on a submission for Summer in This City. I'm kind of in the early stages. There are a couple of ideas I had. I'm not quite sure. Like, I'm afraid a city like Boston might be a very tough sell for R.V. Wood because you're right here and you probably get a lot of submissions for it.
Yeah, but I put a lot of confidence that you'll be able to take care of that. So I look forward to seeing what you come up with.
Thank you.
Mr. Papernick, where are you today, and what are you doing?
I am determined to write a summer story for y'all, and it would be set in Haifa. I spent 9 weeks there this summer, and it was fucking hot. So
I saw some of the pictures, man.
Yeah, I got an idea, and I run with that. And I've got about 200 pages of a novel manuscript called The Oppressor Professor, a novel of the Tentifada, and it deals with some of the stuff we've been seeing on campuses. There's nothing speculative in it. I generally don't write speculative stuff except for you. Yeah, I'd like to get another 50 pages done before I go back in January, but I wrote about 20 pages, 20 words over about 4 hours today, and I was laboring. So
sometimes it works that way, man. Thank you for that.
But I had a very good concentration thanks to an edible. But the words didn't quite flow, but I was tinkering, a lot of tinkering, as you might imagine.
Tincturing or tinkering? Sorry.
Oh.
Victoria, let's not talk about edibles too much tonight. Victoria, what do you got going on? Well, you've started telling us about two works of yours. What else do you have going on?
Yeah, so my debut, A Promise of Sirens, is out now with Outland Entertainment, and that's a urban fantasy, and it's set in Detroit, and it's very much like magic is out in the open, so you can get like a shot of luck in your latte before a big presentation, things like that. It's fun. It's a very fun, like whimsical thing that is like spent like 10 years of my life writing. And it got me through like so much hardship in my life, and the fact that it got picked up and like someone actually saw promise in it was incredible. And then I am also doing I'm going to attempt to do a Summer in the City one. I had one, I think, kind of like Amanda. I'm not sure. I don't think the city might not be big enough to be, because I was looking at the criteria, and I don't think my city is big enough, so I might have to find a new city, but I'd really like to submit for summer. And then I currently have a novel out quarrying that's being looked at, that I have a full manuscript request on, that I'm excited about, for
Excellent.
a sci-fi fantasy where Thomas Edison is the villain, because he is my nemesis.
He is the villain. He's always the villain.
Yeah, he's a terrible human being, and everyone should know that. And that is very much what it's going to be, a young adult novel, but it's, yeah, no, That
Say
guy's
what you
going
want
down.
about say what you want about Family Guy. The Thomas Edison bit that he did was hysterical. I'm Thomas Edison. I invented that. What are you working on? This is a phonograph. Phonograph. I was going to say that. I'm Thomas Edison. I invented that. Funny
Exactly.
stuff. Maria, I know a lot of the stuff you're working on, but why don't you tell the rest of us what you've got going on now besides Locus and Ruadán and
Yeah, so I have I'm writing reviews, short fiction reviews monthly for Locust, so that's really exciting. And I have a short story coming out in an anthology uh called Experimental Files, and it's sort of inspired by Gemma Files' fiction. I love her stuff, and I
I
wrote
love
a
her stuff
story
too.
for that anthology, and it's coming out, I think, in the new year now. It's been a while in the process. And I'm also working on a novella that is my main project right now, which is taking up any time that I have, but isn't taken up by all the other stuff that I'm doing. So yeah, those are my big things right now.
Sleep is
And I'm
overrated.
sorry, I'm gonna have to run because there's a very silly dog in my house. So
We
sorry.
there's a lot of animal lovers on this call, so it's not a problem. And
Yeah.
guys, we have run over about 6 minutes. So for all
Thanks
of you
so
who
much, guys.
joined
It was
us,
great seeing everybody.
I wanted to say thank you, and it's lovely to see all of your faces. Thank you again for participating in Spring in the City. Thank you so much for joining the call. Celebrate what you've done, but don't sit on your laurels because we need more stories like the ones you wrote for us. Thank you all. Have a fantastic evening and holiday season, and we'll talk soon.